Hey, what's going on, guys? Somebody was asking me about a couple problems from chapter 3, so I wanted to go over one, even though I've done one like this. I won't be doing it with someone, so it should move a little bit faster, and then I'll show you the second one as well. So if you need any help on 3.1 or 3.2, here's a couple problems from it. All right. So I took these and actually broke them down from parts A through E, so I can go over each one individually. So if you wanted to kind of skip around, you can see the part that you struggled with. But here's part A. So I've started with 4 blanks, and you can see here that what we're dealing with is 4 unknowns at the moment. And what they're giving us are some pieces of information for us to try to find those things. So at the very beginning, they say that A1 is worth $3.60. So right off the bat, I can simply just write that in without hesitation. All right. Next thing it then goes on to say is that S4 is worth 350. So again, those are now known quantities. And then it says S2 and S3 have equal value, which of course they don't give us anything with that yet. So since those are unknown, but they are the same, we will both call those X. Then it goes on to tell us that the entire cake is worth $15. And since we have all 4 of these, technically, we can add them all up and set it equal to that total of 15 bucks. So that's what I'm going to do now. And now that I have that, notice I have one equation with just one unknown. So we should be able to solve for that, and therefore we will know all 4 quantities, even though they gave us 2. All right, and remember, we're trying to find the fair share. So if we're splitting it 4 different ways, then of those 4 different ways, if it was fair, everyone would get an equal share. So we can simply just take 15 and divide it by 4. And we know that 4 goes into that 3 times, which would be 12. So we'd have 3 left over out of the 4. So that doesn't really equate to money very well. So when we have 3/4, that is the same as 75 cents. Most of you will just choose to use your calculator, which is fine. All right. So what I need to do over here is take those values that I have that are alike and add them up. So since 360 is a little more than 350, and I know 350 plus 350 is $7, I know I have an extra 10 cents. So I'm going to take the 2 x's together and add them and say I have 2 x's plus $7.10, and that's still equal to my 15. Now I'll subtract the $7.10, starting with the 7 bucks. So 15 minus 7 is 8, and then I'll subtract the 10 more cents to get a total of my 2x on one side, because the 710 canceled out, and that would be equal to $7.90, which again we know is going to go in equally. So taking half of those things would give me an X value of, I'm going to pretend that this was $8, because I can take half of that very easily. That's 4 bucks, but I'm missing 10 cents. So I got to take half of that, which is 5 cents off that we don't have. So that would be a total of 95 cents. So now that we know what X is, we can go ahead and plug that in for the 2 places we called it X. So we now know that this is $3.95, as is that one, because they said at the beginning that they were equal. And remember, the fair share at the beginning we found, dividing the $15 total by 4, was $3.75. So anything above that we will keep as a fair split. Otherwise, we will get rid of anything that's less, which would be those 2 right off the bat. So these are the only 2, which is why the person that answered this correctly did the first part very well. Going on to the second, a lot of the same here. All right. Now we got different nuances with this in order for us to kind of break down these still 4 unknowns. So part B, new person, they're calling it Betty, and she says that S2 is, so they're telling us what S2 is right away, and that is worth twice as much as S3. So although they're telling us about S2, they did not tell us anything about S3, even though they compared it. So we're going to go ahead and start with that one being our X. And since they told us that S2 is worth twice as much as that X, that S3, then we can say that this is 2X. Remember, our whole goal is to be able to get one equation with one unknown, one variable. And so far, so good. Next, moving on. It says S4 now is. So now they're telling us about S4. And they say it's worth 3 times as much as S3. Well, that's okay. Even though we don't technically know S3, we did call it X. So since S4 is 3 times S3, then we can say 3X. Again, so far so good. And then lastly, they tell us something about S1. It is 4 times as much as S3. So again, 4 times that, which we called X. There it is. And remember at the beginning, they told us that it was worth $15. So that same fair share, that's not going to change. We'll take our 15 bucks divided by 4. And remember from above, that was 375. So that's what we're looking for constantly with these, is something at or above our fair share amount. And so in this case, we know all of these technically, but in terms of X. So we'll take all of them, the 4, the 2, the 1, and the 3, add them all up and set it equal to that $15. So all together, adding them, I have 4 and 2 is 6, plus 1 more is 7, plus 3 would be 10. So we have 10 X's altogether equals that $15 original. And then from there, we can go ahead and divide by 10. And we know that when we divide by 10, that just moves our decimal over one place to the left because it's getting smaller. So that's actually going to be equal to $1.50, which is good and bad. Remember, we're looking for $3.75 for fair shares. So the $1.50 is definitely there for X. But when I double it, we know that that's $3. When we double that, we'll have 4. So that would be $6. And then 3 times that $1.50, we know that would be $3. And then 50 cents 3 times is another $1.50. So that would be a total of $4.50. Or again, feel free to use your calculator for those. And then remember, we're looking for the fair share amount, which definitely that section would not be it, nor would that one. So in this case, the $4.50 and the $6 would be okay, which is why S1 and S4 was another correct answer by this student. Now these start getting a little bit more challenging on part C and D, so hang in there. If you got these, great. If not, here we go. It says, Corey, now for part C, S2, S1, and S4 all have equal value. So that's cool. We know that S2, S1, and S4, all of those are going to be the same. Now, should I call those X? I'm not quite sure yet, so I'm going to keep reading just in case, but let's check and see what else they give us to work with. It says that S3 is, so they're telling us something about S3 right now, which is the only one that they did not tell us anything about. It said that it's worth as much as S2, S1, and S4 combined. So very good. We are going to call S1, S2, and S4 X because at the beginning they said are all equal value. And then remember S3 is as much of those combined, which if you add all those up, that would be 3X. And remember, our goal for all of these is to get one equation with one unknown. And now that I have all of these in terms of X, I can add them up, set it equal to, again, 15. And we're looking for that fair share of 375 again. So now that we have that, we'll set up our equation by adding 1, 2, 3, plus 3 more, which is a total of 6X. And we're going to set that equal to 15 bucks. And in order to solve that, we'll go ahead and divide by 6. And we know 6 goes into 15. only twice, which would be 12. So we'll have 3 left over, bring down the 0, keeping our decimal. And now 6 goes into, we're going to look at that as a 30, even though we just bring our decimal down. And we know 6 goes into 30 5 times. So that's good because we just found 3 of ours are 250. The bad part is not one of those is a fair share. So even though we found those 3 values, we know that we will not keep them. And because this is 3 times that for S3, we know it's definitely going to be more than 375. So that is our one and only answer for our fair share amount for Corey. And then part D here, the last one was for Dana. And Dana says that S1 is worth $10 more than S2. So they're telling us that S1 is something, but they're comparing it to S2, which we know nothing about. So we'll start that one off with X. And since it's $1 more, we're going to say $1 more than what? Well, rather than using S2, I'm just going to use X because it's much simpler. Okay. Next, it then tells us that S4 is something. So we know we're looking at this blank, and it's worth $1 more than S1. Now, S1 we had as X plus 1. So if that's what we're doing, $1 more on top of that, then we can write it as X plus 1, which would just be X plus 2. So far, so good. All of these are in terms of X, which is nice. So then S3, they also tell us something about that, just like they, on the last one, told us S4 compared to S1. This time they say S3 is worth $3, period. Well, that's nice. I can simply write that in. And if you want to put the dollar sign with 0.00, all good, 3 is 3. Okay, this time they're telling us the cake is worth a total of $18. So unlike the other ones, they're changing the price for Dana. Poor Dana. Now, if it's 18 bucks, we know altogether that we have 1, 2, 3 X's plus a total dollar amount of 1 here, 2 there, which is 3, plus 3 more, which is a total of 6. And remember, they told us the cake is now worth 18 bucks. There's our one equation, one unknown, and that's the whole trick to these. A bunch of word problems like we used to do in algebra. So now we just undo all of these operations by first subtracting to get a 3x on the left and 12 on the right. Divide by 3 to both sides. And we have now found x is $4, which means I know that this is $4. This is still and always will be 3. And then this was $4 plus 1, which would be $5 for S1. And then over here, 4 plus 2, a total of $6. But are we still working with that fair share of $3.75 as we were before? Well, no. Remember, our total changed. So since our total is now 18 bucks, we'd have to take our 4 different sections that we're still cutting it into and set that equal to $18. So now when we go and we divide that, just like we were, we'll go ahead and divide by 4 to get our 1x. And we know 4 goes into 18 4 times, but that would be 16. So we still have 2 left over. Keep your decimal there, bring down the next 0, and now 4 goes into 20 5 times. And that gets rid of everything, so zeros as many times as you need. We're looking at a fair share of $4.50. That's our fair share price. And as you can see, that negates 2 and 3, so we will have a fair share for S4 and even S1. So those would have been our answers for part D. Very similar to parts A through C. Okay, now that we have all that information, they want us to put some of this together. So I'm going to quickly outline what we said. Abe, Betty, Corey, and Dana all said were their fair shares by going back to what we said originally for each one of them. So these are options. And as you can see, for Corey, he's the stubborn one, I guess. He only wants part 3. So we definitely have to choose S3 for Corey, which means if we use S3 for him, we have to negate it anywhere else, which means now we only have one choice for Abe. And by the way, you could have stopped after that very first thing that we did, because there's only one of these options, A, B, C, and D for part E here, that give Corey S3. That's the only one. All these other ones are not that. So our only answer possibility would be part D. Okay, but continuing on with the explanation, just in case you do have more options. Since S2 was what we chose next, then those are gone, and notice that was not an option anywhere else. So at that point, B and D would be fine with either S1 or S4. So that's where you flip a coin, choose a card, do something at random to see who gets what. Okay, so that's that problem. Here's the next. And this one was from section 2 of chapter 3. And it's a little bit more mathy. Okay, not as algebraic. So for this one, again, you can read it. Go ahead and pause it if you need to, but I'll just go through it very quickly with you. It starts by saying, Jared and Carla jointly bought a half meatball, half vegetarian, and they're saying it's a 24-inch sub. And it was $9. So 24-inch sub for $9, and it was half meatball, half vegetarian. They want to divide it fairly using the divider chooser method. So again, why is it named divider chooser? Pretty obvious reasons, right? One's going to divide, one's going to choose if there's only 2 people. Okay, which in this case, they're starting us off nice and easy. Jared likes meatball subs 3 times as much. So now they're giving us some important information here. So Jared likes the meatballs 3 times as much as the vegetarian. And then it goes on to say that Carla is a vegetarian and therefore does not eat meat. So you think it would be kosher to each of them to just cut right in half, and one has the meatball, one has the vegetarian. However, remember there are some rules that are in place with a lot of these things, and it's no previous information is known to either person. So there's no unfair advantage. Okay, so that's what the next part says. Assume that Jared doesn't know, and vice versa. Okay, so it says assume that the sandwich is cut along its width. And so we're going to cut it right in half there at that 12-inch mark. And they want to know a few things. Okay, the first, determine how Jared should cut the sandwich into 2 shares. So we're talking about Jared and cutting it into 2 equal shares. So they want us to describe the different shares using interval notation. So the first thing we need to look at on this is, all right, well, obviously Jared said that that first section, which we're going to call the vegetarian, and then the meatball for the other, all right, he said that he liked one 3 times as much as the other, and that was the meatball. So if we don't know this first section, which is the vegetarian side, we know that he likes this 3 times as much. So just like we did in the previous one, we're going to take those two, and we need an equation now that we've got them both in terms of x. And what do we know the whole thing costs? Well, just like before on the previous examples, we said that if we took those 2 things and add them together, it would equal the total, which in this one they said $9. So adding that up, we get 4x equals $9, and then we will take that and divide both sides by 4 to get what x is. Now again, notice you can do this in your head, but calculators sometimes faster. 4 goes into 9 twice, which would be 8, so we'd have 1 left over. Bring down the decimal and that 0. 4 goes into that, twice again, which would be 8 again, and we'd have 2 left over. Bring down the next 0, and 4 goes in that 5 times. So we now know the cost for X, which that means that this, according to Jared, would only be worth $2.25 out of the 9, and then this would be 3 times that, so $6.75. Now we want to know how much each of these is worth, and we now have that. And remember, this should add up to a total of $9, which if you add up the 2 and the 6, you get 8, 25 cents and 75. There's your 9. So we want to know what proportion of this whole sandwich Jared should make the cut at. Because remember, he is not privy to the information that Carla is actually a vegetarian. She doesn't want any part of the meatball. So if he was smart and he wanted to get a little bit more, he could even cut part of the vegetarian. And that's why we make those rules. Because otherwise he can have an unfair advantage knowing that she doesn't want any part of the meatball. So if he was to cut a little bit more of the vegetarian, he could actually get more sandwich for himself. So now that we know what he values each, the vegetarian and the meatball sub at, remember what we want to figure out and make sure that he gets his fair share. So although he wants this and it's worth that much to him, we then need to figure out how much of the 450 of the meatball side that would be. So plugging that into your calculator, you should get out 2/3. And so we know that he wants at least to get his fair share of the meatball side, which we valued based on his expertise, saying it's worth 3 times as much to him. We know that's equivalent to 2/3 of the meatball. So what we're going to do is take 2/3 of the entire sandwich, which is that 24-inch sandwich. And when we do some canceling there, we know the 3 goes in that 8 times, so we get 2 times 8 over 1, which is where he should make his cut. So that's why this is the correct answer at 16 inches. That way, if he was to make that cut right around here, he would guarantee himself at least some meatballs here. And if not, he gets just a little bit of the meatballs there, but more of the sandwich, which then he, according to him, can live with. Okay? So part 2 of this, part B, says, it's a couple parts, it actually could be parts B and C, but it says after Jared makes the cut, well then since he was the divider, then Carla gets to be the chooser. And obviously she's not going to choose S2 because unbeknownst to Jared, she's vegetarian. She is by far going to select that first section, which is the only part that had vegetarian on it. Okay? So now what we need to do, the last thing, is what value of that share would it mean to Carla? So if we went backwards and she was the one that we actually did the dividing with, then remember, she has no value, no desire to eat meat because she's a vegetarian. So therefore, she is simply going to make of that entire sandwich, all 24 inches, the 12 over here and the 12 over here, the vegetarian and the meatball, she's going to have this at 0 value to her, which means the whole side over here that's vegetarian will be worth the entire total of the sandwich, $9. Okay? So hopefully that made sense for anyone that was struggling on those two. Continue to let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, keep reading, watching videos, and then just working through these. And if you can find a person or two to work through this together with, trust me, that would definitely help you since we're not in the classroom being able to do those things on our own. All right? Have a good one. Hopefully you guys are breathing okay. Take care.